Welcome, everyone. I'm Justin Paperny. Welcome to the White Collar Advice channel. It's a privilege for me today to bring my friend Rich onto the program. Thanks for joining us, Rich.
I'd like to say I'm glad to be here, but I am happy to be here.
Yes, I can fully understand that. Let me start this interview by reading a text message Rich sent me last week. I'll also put an image up. Rich texted me, I wanted to thank you for your sage advice. Last November, I pled guilty to a Medicare conspiracy charge that had a sentencing guideline of 37 to 46 months. My original sentencing hearing was scheduled for April, but was postponed to December 1st due to the pandemic. When I spoke with you last November, you gave me advice that I took to heart. Ultimately, I wrote a letter to the judge that I read out loud as part of my elocution. Thanks to your advice, the judge commended me on the depth and sincerity of my elocution. He told me it was the most heartfelt elocution he's ever heard on the bench, and sentenced me to 6 months in a minimum security camp with 6 months of house arrest, no ankle bracelet. Following your advice made all the difference in my sentencing, and it helped start me on the road to my redemption in the eyes of society and the people I love most. I want to thank you personally, and I promise to write a testimonial on your behalf. Thank you for helping me at the time of my most dire need. So rather than getting into every portion of that text message and using this as a whole testimonial for our work at White Collar Advice, and I'm grateful for that text message, I want to transition because people watching this, they want to learn and they too want to get the best possible outcome at sentencing. So can you give us a couple of minutes on who you are and how you became immersed in the criminal justice system before we actually get into your preparations?
Sure. My name is Rich.
Mm-hmm.
I'm turning 65 in March,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm March 12th. But on March 1st, I'm supposed to be able to report to a federal facility that they'll be telling me about shortly.
Mm-hmm.
So this is certainly not what I envisioned for my golden years.
Mm-hmm.
Not the legacy that I wish to leave behind for my family and my friends, especially my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I have ultimately no one to blame but myself. And this was a very rude awakening. And it's really, if I look at my life, the arc of my life, I'm the author of my own fate. And it shames me, the fact that I brought myself to this point. But I really feel that ultimately, they always talk about hitting bottom as being a moment that your life is able to make a change. And although I've never been addicted to any substance or abuse any substance, I certainly know what it's like to hit bottom. And thanks to your help, Justin, you've been able to help turn it into a transformative kind of moment where it's not the end of my life, but it's the beginning of my redemption,
Mm-hmm.
that I can find ways of being able to still get back on track where I first started, and to be able to do things that could be making a meaningful change in the world, making the world a better place, and to be able to hopefully earn back not only the trust and the, let's just say trust by society and the people that I love most, but hopefully to be able to look at myself in the mirror and be able to still be confident and proud of who I am. So you've given me a help in being able to take that path. So I do appreciate it.
I'm grateful for those words. Through some of the work at White Collar Advice, books, lectures, videos, we of course try to offer insights to try to get the shortest sentence possible, and we'll talk about that. And some people say it's corny and cheesy when I mention the legacy component to it and thinking 100 years out and working our way back after we're dead and gone, how our kids may talk about that you were in prison. Or when I was writing lessons from prison, I was 33. I didn't have children, but I wrote about how if I had children someday, how they would respond to the fact that I was in prison and trying to create a legacy I can be proud of. So I convey to you, while you talk about some bad choices you've made in this legacy, it can totally be rebuilt with the right record and authenticity. And in the end, it can turn out to be a positive. Sounds insane. We're not happy you're going to jail, of course, though there are so many hidden benefits. Back to your preparations. How did you begin even preparing? How did you come across White Collar Advice? Was there something specific our team said that compelled you to reach out? Help us understand when you're in these dark days of dealing with a federal indictment, you began this preparation process.
I would say that my dark moment came when I got the knock on the door
Mm-hmm.
from the federal agents in April. It would be a year and a half ago, and I was panic stricken, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that anybody that's watching this video right now could relate, you know. And it's one of those kinds of things where you feel like oh my God, it's like you go through this feeling of shock and denial and anger at yourself and what have you, and it feels desperate. And I wasn't in a position to be able to afford my own legal representation.
Mm-hmm.
It took about a month or so or two. I forget, looking back, of how long it took for them to be able to assign me somebody. But I took the attitude from the very beginning that fighting this would not be something that would take me to a place in my life that I needed to be. Mm-hmm. That I needed to find some way of being able to, and I know this is going to sound extremely Pollyannish, I had to find a way to embrace it, mm-hmm. to be able to make sure that the outcome was something that I wasn't fighting, but instead that I'd find a way of being able to see a brighter day ahead. Mm-hmm. When I was very young, I was studying to be a clinical psychologist, which is a long story about my road to redemption. But I remember reading a book called by a psychologist by the name of Levinson. I forget his first name. And it was called it was Seasons of a Man's Life. Mm-hmm. And it was about adult development psychology. And they talk about different stages of your life and what the meaningful tasks and challenges are and what it takes for you to be able to move through it. And if this is the stage of a man's life, that legacy was paramount, of not leaving your name on a building, but in a sense being able to leave your name in people's minds and in their hearts. Mm-hmm. Like if I was to die, what would people say about me? Mm-hmm. And I became aware of the fact that my life wasn't where I wanted it to be. This was not the legacy I wanted to create for myself. Mm-hmm. And I needed to be able to find a way of being able to make this not something that I had to cope with, but something that I was able to emerge from stronger, something mm-hmm. transformative. And I started doing some diligent searches on the internet about what to expect. And that's where I came across your website, and I watched a handful of the videos, mm-hmm. pretty much somebody that, and I'm sure there was people like me that were featured in some of these discussions. And I had reached out to you, and you were saying things that spoke to me. Mm-hmm. You spoke to me in a way that was not disrespectful and demeaning. You spoke to me in a way that conveyed that you understood what I was hoping for. Mm-hmm. You weren't trying to give me a get out of jail free card. Mm-hmm. You were trying to be able to lay down a path for me that if I followed it, I would not. The ultimate goal, of course, was to be able to reduce or negate my sentence. Mm-hmm. But the path to do that had a lot to do with my own path to personal redemption. Mm-hmm. And it was through that experience of being able to take a real hard look at my life and the decisions that I made and why I was where I was, that I was able to start writing this letter to the judge almost as a diary. Mm-hmm. It was a very painful, cathartic experience for me because I had to be painfully honest. Mm-hmm. And of course, I had to find ways of being able to edit it and structure it. But I took your words to heart about taking responsibility mm-hmm. for what it is that I did wrong, not blaming other people, mm-hmm. not throwing myself at the mercy of the court, but thanking the court for giving me an opportunity to be able to look at my life and to make it right, mm-hmm. recognizing that I'm the one that victimized other people, mm-hmm. and that if anything is going to be happening to my family, it's not because of the justice system that's doing it. It's because I put them on the path for that, and I needed to be able to own up to it.
For those of you watching, on that first call with Rich, there were some glaring reminders for me, and what I admired about it wasn't just the fixating on the shortest sentence, which of course is the goal for every defendant, but it was also the legacy piece and how can I work to create a new message. And that's really the message that was instilled upon me by my business partner, Michael Santos, when I met him in prison, when I was just imploding over all the damage that I had done and ruining my reputation, embarrassing my family, creating victims. I didn't think there was a path forward. So on that first call, Rich wasn't just thinking about sentencing, but life after sentencing. And also, to his credit, and something that I think is important, he was willing to do the work. I frequently say to clients or on sales calls, there are some people that have no idea how to prepare. I frequently get calls from someone who have just been sentenced and they're Googling and they find our book or videos and they'll say, oh, I had no idea you existed. Well, a lot of people know what to do and they might not actually do it. Perhaps it's a lawyer telling them, I'm a former U.S. attorney, I get paid a lot of money, I do all of this work. despite federal judges on this YouTube channel telling us the nuts and bolts of the work should come from the defendant, or Judge Boo telling us 1 to 2% of the work at sentencing he's influenced 1 to 2% by the lawyer. No disrespect to the lawyer. Judge Boo is a lawyer. It's simply because lawyers are paid to convey why you're worthy of leniency. What Rich did incredibly well was take his knowledge and then begin to implement it through writing and documenting it. So can you walk us through a little bit of that documentation and implementation process, and then how you shared it with your federal public defender? Had they seen anything like what we had produced or what you turned over? Help us understand what you did with the content once you produced it.
Well, once I produced it, there was an end stage of it. I mean, the way I was drafting it is I would be on my iPhone and I would be writing emails to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, when I thought of a paragraph or I thought of a phrase or there was a quotation that really was something that was important, so I created an ongoing dialogue with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately what I did is I just copied and pasted it, and then I crafted this letter.
Mm-hmm.
And I started reaching out to people that were very dear to me,
Mm-hmm.
that it was hard for me to admit to my failings and my frailties. But what I found is that by opening up to them, I was able to find that people were far more merciful to me than I was being to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was absolutely my own worst enemy. I remember going to the Bronx Zoo when I was a little kid, the age of 9 or 10, and coming into an exhibit that, coming out of the reptile house, there was a stone bench and then this thing that you look into. There's a sign that says, "You're about to see the most dangerous animal on the planet." Mm-hmm. And when you look into it, there's a mirror and you're looking at yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what I sort of took from that experience was I realized that when I look in the mirror, I'm looking at either my own best friend or my own worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And by being able to bring in the counsel of family and friends, and of course, Justin, I was able to start seeing myself through less punishing eyes. Mm-hmm. But it also enabled me to be able to become far more open and candid, not just with the judge, but with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I started reading my letter out loud to some of my friends to get their reaction. And what was amazing to me was the amount of emotional kind of an experience that I was having each time. Like I knew it was in a sense a script. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was on a script because I wrote it.
Yep.
But every time I got to certain words or phrases or moments where I was talking about where my life is and where it should be and where I want to bring it, the tears were very genuine. Mm-hmm. Then I got afraid that by the time that I read it to the judge, I'd be emotionally exhausted from the experience of creation.
Yes, it
the
actually
opposite happened.
Yeah.
But with my attorney, I was always very painfully sincere with him, so I don't think he took it as a surprise that I would be so candidly open mm-hmm. and confessional mm-hmm. and redemptive in my hopes when I composed the letter. And when I sent it to him, of course I asked him for feedback. And he gave me some very beautiful feedback. He told me that he really, really liked the letter. Mm-hmm. But there was a few paragraphs that he wanted me to delete. And it was because of the fact of length, number one. Mm-hmm. But also when I talked in my letter about embracing restitution and seeing it not as a financial or as a legal obligation, but as a moral obligation, as something that I needed to do to find redemption in my life, to be redeemed in the eyes of society, to be able to earn back society's trust so that I could then look in that mirror again, like at the Bronx Zoo, and see not my worst enemy, but my own best friend.
For all of you listening, there are some key points that Rich is conveying that all of you have to convey if you've pled guilty. Frankly, even if you've been convicted at trial, you still have the responsibility to convey through your own words who you are, what you've learned, why you're worthy of leniency. But in our sentencing course, or in the work that our team does with so many clients, it's articulating these salient points in a narrative or statement. And Rich just touched on all of them: introspection, remorse, identifying with victims, lessons learned, why he'll never return to another courtroom, goals and plans moving forward. And he really understood through our work what he can convey and what his lawyers paid to convey through a sentencing memorandum. We're talking about the personal narrative and the statement. So it's just so important for those of you who are frequently get confused. Well, does my lawyer do this? You should work on parallel paths with your lawyer. It's the lawyer producing the third person content. There's things that only you can convey, as Rich and I really are discussing in this video. Rich, as we make our way towards the end of this.
Can I
yes.
respond to that?
Yes.
I pled guilty a year ago in November.
Mm-hmm.
My original sentence hearing was scheduled for April 16th. It was postponed a number of times because of COVID,
mm-hmm.
which was a saving grace for me. But it was a saving grace in ways that are very profound, because it not only gave me more time, but the weird thing is, like, the sword of Damocles was hanging over my head. It was very debilitating and paralyzing.
Yep.
The fear.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, when they set the date for December 1st, it allowed me to be able to have that journey where my letter was now a profound statement of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I was given an opportunity of being, because I live in South Florida, and my court appearance was up in Savannah, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me an option of being able to do it by Zoom. And I declined. I really wanted to be in front of the judge, because I needed that judge to be able to see the power of my feelings. And I'm on Zoom right now, and I'm very self-conscious, and with everything else, I didn't want
it's different. Yep.
to get in the way of the message that I needed to be able to create for them.
Mm-hmm.
When my attorney would talk to me about, and I would, of course, always want to be able to know, what do you think? What's my chances? What are they going to do with COVID? I'm turning 65. All those kinds of things that would mitigate a sentence. And he would say, look, all I can tell you, and this is a guy that does murder. He was appointed to me, but he's usually doing state murder. So,
mm-hmm.
I mean, he's dealing with people that have far more to worry about than I do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And all he would say is, look, the sentencing guidelines are, you're probably looking at 37 to 46 months.
When you heard,
that's a crippling feeling.
Yeah, it's a big number, especially when, as you mentioned earlier, there's no history of drinking or substance abuse, meaning you would not participate in the substance abuse program, which could both get treatment but also up to 18 months off of your sentence. So that's a very long time. As we make our way towards the end of this video, when you heard 6 months, can you quickly tell us the response and just how you felt when the judge sentenced you to 6 months instead of 37 or 46 months in prison?
I don't know if it's because I'm in denial right now or not, but I felt like the judge gave me the biggest lease on life.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching the news. You get this kind of a thing when you see people that are being sentenced to, with those college admission scandals, and somebody was, given 4 months, and I remember sitting there watching the news and saying, wow, if the judge gave me 4 months right now, I would consider myself a lottery winner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where you sort of know what you're expecting, and anything less than that is considered a bonus. And when he gave it to me, it was like an out-of-body experience, mm-hmm. because I was expecting far worse.
Well, I think what you did well, I think any defendant should condition themselves for the worst possible sentence. There's nothing worse than
my daughter would often ask me,
yeah,
what's going to happen? And she's 23 years old. She's very bright. It hurts me knowing what this does to her, but it's not the criminal justice system that's done it to her. It's me. Mm-hmm. I've given her reason to be shamed, to be scared, to be fearful, to be worried. She's 23. She has her own preoccupations. And my job as a dad is to protect her, not for her to protect me. And still, it's one of those kinds of things when I want this to be a lesson for her that you could screw up, but tomorrow always gives you another chance to make things right. That's how I have to live my life. Mm-hmm. And when that judge gave me 6 months, I mean, with COVID, it's been almost like house arrest for the whole world for the last 6 months. Mm-hmm. But what the judge said to me that meant more to me is when and this is perhaps vanity or narcissism on my part, or it's just a sense of denial and delusion. But he really seemed to listen to everything that I said. And when he was giving me my sentence, he said that he was very touched and moved by my words, He told me in all of his years on the bench, he'd never heard of an allocution so deeply sincere.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talked about what my life path was and how I veered off that path, he reminded me that this is your opportunity to get back on that path, to do the things that you've told me that you wish to do with your life, to be able to make a difference in this world, and to be able to be the man in your daughter's eyes that you wish to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to follow that path, because I know if you do so, you'll become a valued member of society again. And it was a conversation that I felt privileged to have earned, to be able to prove him right.
Everything you're saying is so relevant to how and why defendants should prepare, which leads to really two final questions that I have as we wrap up this video. I frequently tell potential clients that because we're not clairvoyant or psychic, we can't predict exactly what a judge is going to do at sentencing. Regardless of how hard you prepared, there's a chance you could have gotten 37 or 46 months in prison. Though, as I've learned, and you're clearly articulating, the value of preparing, of being authentic, of reaching out to your network, of investing the time. Now, I'm convinced that, of course, help leads to a better sentence. But even if you got the 37 months, Rich, even if our resources led to a guideline recommended sentence, preferably on the lower end, of course, help us understand the dignity you felt in preparing, the ownership you took in creating content you knew could help you, how you would have felt even if you got the 37 months at that courtroom. What would you have felt like?
To answer that question, I'm going to go back till April, 2 weeks before my original sentencing hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And, I effed up my life. And when I talk about hitting bottom, there was a week that I was living in my car in a Walmart parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the beginning of COVID. And I was on the phone and I was trying to negotiate deals for PPE, the personal protection equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was engaged in these conversations with people professionally. They didn't know I'm sitting in my car,
Mm-hmm.
sleeping in my car, urinating in a McDonald's cup, going through drive-thrus. I was talking to my family and my friends who knew my situation, and I was having heartfelt conversations with them.
Mm-hmm.
Deeply heartfelt. And it was an amazing thing, the closest I felt with these people at my moment of hitting bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, had I written my letter at that moment, and I can remember vividly talking to my attorney about it, I was going to ask the judge, I said, something I realized in my life, this is going back to April, that the reason why I've made the mistakes that I've made is because I've never really had to deal with the consequences of my mistakes. And I'm asking the judge right now to make me live with those consequences. If I have to find a way of being able to rebuild my life, it means that I have to be able to not get off on a technicality. I don't have to get off on the mercy of the court. I need to face up my responsibility so that I knew by taking it like a man, and I don't mean that in a sexist way, but just taking it as an authentic person, is that I'll pay my debts to society and I'll find a way to make myself useful. And I would remember the kinds of things written by Viktor Frankl about finding meaning, in a concentration camp where the world is being unfair to him and he's finding a way to emerge courageous. I can't externalize the blame for where I am in life to others. But for me to be able to move forward, I'm going to deal with the consequences of my behavior. And I remember telling the judge that. Not my judge, my attorney. And he says, wow, I've never heard anybody say that. And again, I know that sounds narcissistic. But I was ready back in April, during the 2 weeks before my original sentence hearing, to throw myself on the mercy of the court, not to release me, but to give me the penalty. So I figured it has to be better than sleeping in a car.
Rich, hold on. Rich, hold on 1 second. I'm going to ask. I'm going to edit this portion. I'm going to ask one final question, and to the extent that you can, try to summarize it in maybe 90 seconds or less, a couple of minutes, because I'm going to have to edit all of this together. So I'm going to kind of jump around this and jump in. So Rich, let me wrap up with one final question, as you've alluded to, the wondering and the waiting for sentencing can oftentimes be the hardest part. In my case, waiting 3.5 years to get sentenced was brutal. Frankly, my sentencing date felt easier than my guilty plea because at least I have clarity. People on our channel are watching this, wondering, they're confused, they're concerned for their future. Can you give a takeaway message to them on how they can best prepare, not just for sentencing, for the rest of their life? They were you. What should they do right now if they were you again going through this process?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because if I had to be able to say anything to anyone, and it's not just about this experience, but anything in life, it's take responsibility for your life and what's happened. Don't point fingers. Don't come up with excuses. It's not going to get you what you want, and it's not going to help you become the person that you would wish and need to be. So take responsibility, show true and authentic remorse, feel guilty for the right reasons because you know you did what's wrong. Being able to tell the story that you know the difference between right and wrong, and that it's your responsibility for having made the wrong decisions. That you know the difference between taking the high road and the low road, and about how you got lost along the way. And then ultimately about being able to embrace your restitution in a way that's not a financial or a legal obligation, but one that's a moral one that comes from you because you know it's what's right to do. And by doing so, you're showing that you're on the path to redemption. Because if you could do those things of accepting responsibility, showing genuine remorse, knowing the difference between the high and low road, and then embracing restitution and as a path to redemption, you'll find that whatever the judge gives you, it'll be something that you could live and cope with and emerge from. And it's letting go gives you the chance to be able to connect with that judge in a way that I believe personally would be very hopeful and very, very hopeful.
So as I close, a little tip from me to all of you watching. What Rich says, whether he knows it or not, the embracing and understanding of his story and working to grow his network and share lessons learned is the heart of what successful defendants do. I've referenced a book I read years ago by Malcolm Gladwell called David and Goliath, and in there, Gladwell writes about how underdogs thrive and succeed. And to a degree, convicted felons are underdogs. We have to approach situations differently. And some people run and don't want to talk about their story or really work to grow their network. I guess I understand it. I don't think it's the best strategy. A few days ago, a defendant called and told me that he had no character reference letters because he didn't want to burden and bother people in his network who would love nothing more than to come to his support. And then at the end of the conversation, he acknowledged, well, I really don't want to discuss it with people. Yet he wants the shortest sentence. He wants to try to do what Rich did, which is take 46 months down to 6 months. And to do that, it requires some discomfort, embracing this status, thinking through this situation differently. And that may include having very tough conversations, speaking openly about what you've done. And if you can embrace that path, that underdog path that Rich articulated beautifully, even if he knows it or not, is the type of path that you need to follow as you're wondering and waiting what will happen. So Rich, I'm very grateful that you've taken the time to share your story, that you allowed our team at White Collar Advice to help prepare you to get not just the shortest sentence, which of course I know is the obsession. I was obsessed with getting the best sentence, but also thinking 5, 10, 15 years out and working your way back. So I'm so grateful for the testimonial and your friendship and for educating others going through a very difficult time we know so well. So thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me my life back.
You're very well. That's very kind of you. Thank you.